Well, Chinese President Xi Jinping appealed to strengthening cultural bonds between Asians in a keynote speech Wednesday that launched the first ever Conference on Dialogue of Asian Civilizations. President Xi also spoke of the need for greater self-confidence within the continent's respective cultures, as well as the need for mutual respect and equal treatment. This as Asia continues to emerge economically on the global stage. Speaking to representatives of 47 Asian countries and 50 countries outside the region, President Xi stated no civilization is superior to others and that it is foolish to believe that one's race and civilization are superior to others, and it is disastrous to willfully reshape or even replace other civilizations. Joining us in our Beijing studio to talk about all of this is Rong Ying, Vice President of the China Institute of International Studies, as well as David Moser, Associate Dean of the Yenching Academy of Peking University. But first, let's hear from one of Argentina's participants who attended the dialogue's very first day. Take a listen.
Learning together, mutual learning, because everybody, every people all over the world, in Asia, all over the world can show their culture, their music, can show their literature, and in the spirit of President Xi Jinping's speech, have its spirit of understanding that dialogue is a tool that will be more and more important in this century. We cannot think the world with all the parameters of 20th century.
Yeah.
The 21st century is different. It's dialogue, it's understanding diversity, and understanding each other as a source of knowledge. And this is the most important spirit that I can appreciate in President Xi's speech.
What about the South American culture as a legacy of the Inca culture, let's say? What can you share with the world?
We can share, you know, we're working a lot with the National Radio Television of China, with the agreements. We want to share our culture, our tango. You know that tango is very important for us.
What's the spirit of the tango that you want to share?
You know, this is a very good question, because tango is a dance. Tango is music, but it's not. Tango is spirit. The idea in the 21st century that you can dance together, but very close, embrace your company, and this is unusual when everybody is dancing, each other separates. The idea of being together and have the same spirit. This is more important for tango.
All right, so gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here on The Point. Lots to dissect from President Xi's opening speech at the Conference on Dialogue of Asian Civilizations. Professor Rong, I want to get to you first in terms of what were your major takeaways from President Xi's speech earlier this morning?
Well, I think the major takeaway of the speech is certainly, of course, the four proposals here put forward, that how to promote exchanges and mutual learning, how to promote dialogues among civilizations. And I think this is important in the context that the Asia as a whole is now emerging as one of the sort of a center of gravity, as the world is undergoing a kind of a shift of a balance of power. And China as a country, Asian countries, and is sort of advocating a kind of thinking an initiative, actually, I mean, how to build a community of shared future for the world, but start from Asia.
Yeah.
And as President Xi said that China is now a more sort of economically certainly developed, and they is also very much confident. And while China will continue to promote and contribute economically to Asia and the world, and providing Chinese solution or Chinese wisdom to manage or to address the issues, the challenges. But China would also equally making cultural contributions to promote, I mean, a peaceful, harmonious world. So this is a very much, I think, the message President Xi tried to make.
Professor Rong, I want to do a quick follow-up to what you mentioned in terms of balance of power. It almost seems like maybe there is a mindset change, a mindset shift from President Xi's speech, perhaps we are going away from this balance of power concept, right, in terms of more dialogue and cooperation, going away from the idea of realism towards more cooperation and creating this community of shared future for mankind. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Exactly. I think this is if I say, could I say, this is the most important message of his speech. They say, as the economically and technologically they are making an advance, the power of these sort of area are important, but the cultural and the civilization, the power of cultural civilization are equally important, possibly more important than that.
Okay.
So that is, I think, the major message, I think,
yeah,
or the highlight
yeah.
I make.
And Professor Rong touched upon this as well. Professor Moser, I want to get to you. Peace was also stressed continuously throughout President Xi's speech, because this is something that should unite us all, whether it's in Asia or anywhere else in the world. So why do you think President Xi stressed so much on this issue, especially given for Asia? We've seen tremendous growth in this part of the world for many decades already. So perhaps we've taken it for granted. That's why he stressed it so many times.
Perhaps. I think China is a country, and Xi Jinping, of course, is aware well of this, a country that acutely feels the effects of its war-torn past. The fact that most of the 20th century they were at war, and also, you know, a trade war is a war, and a Cold War is a war. And these are all periods where productivity goes down, no improvement can be made, and bilateral relations can't be maintained. And I think China, as it's now opening up, it's forging its own geopolitical alliances, especially projects like the Belt and Road, where they have to maintain continuous cooperation with other countries and find win-win situations. That the peaceful development is the only way to go. Otherwise, you know, there'll be stumbling blocks or failures along the way.
Yeah.
And I think that China is a country that also has, you know, and perhaps you could even say this is true of the Asian countries in general, are countries that tend to try to find win-win solutions rather than focusing on conflicts and trying to defuse them or to try to have meetings to resolve them. They tend to avoid those at first, establish the relationships primarily initially on the basis of shared interests and win-win situations, and then build from there. I think that might be a good way to forge the future, given the diversity and the many opposing interests that all these countries have.
I mean, there's 1,000 different ethnicities here in Asia, so if we don't go the peaceful route, simply it won't work, won't be sustainable going forward.
Exactly. And China, of course, is a country that is taking more and more predominance. A lot of the countries in the region are looking to China, sometimes with hope, but also sometimes with uncertainty and sometimes fear. Anytime you have a rising power, and so it's very important that these relationships be built on trust, and that they have a sort of a continuation built upon win-win cooperation.
Okay, so Professor Rong, you mentioned mutual respect and equal treatment. This is what President Xi was talking about earlier this morning. So reading between the lines then, do you think he's seeing situations occurring in the world right now where there is situations of disrespect and unequal treatment?
Indeed, I think if you look at the statements, look at even the attempts and acts by some countries, would find that this is real kind of a danger and a real sort of a foolish way to do that. President Xi in his speech made it very clear we human beings certainly are different, but different in terms of the color of the skin, not necessarily that in the sense that, I mean, that the civilizations, some of them are superior than others. And if you look at the policy statement of the United States and others, they are sincere, they are genuine believers that, I mean, among different sort of civilizations, different countries, I mean, there are kind of other, I mean, kind of conflict, I mean, among dialogue, among civilizations. So China instead, I mean, on the contrary, is advocating a kind of a dialogue, advocating a kind of a sort of a thinking that should learn from each other, and for the benefits of themselves and for the benefits of the world as a whole. So this is a very much, I think, progressive, very much open, and very much inclusive way to address this. As the saying goes, that dialogue, I mean, conflict, I mean, starts where the dialogue ceases. So, in other way around, I mean, that is, when you start dialogue, then I mean, understanding will promoted, and then conflicts well, will be, I mean, better understanding, and the conflicts will be better managed.
Yeah, and we've been talking about this for the past few days, Professor Moser, in terms of refuting this thinking of the clash of civilizations that was espoused by Professor Samuel Huntington back in the mid-1990s, and now we are talking about a dialogue of civilizations. We have touched upon this point many times in the past few days, but I want to get your take on this transition from clash to dialogue to cooperation.
Yeah, I think this is very interesting because, ironically, some of the people right now speaking most loudly in terms of clash of civilizations are Americans who, in their heritage, we are a prime example of many different ethnicities and nationalities who came together and forged a nation and cooperated and built a sort of a unified political power. So it's kind of ironic that they're now sort of opposing this notion of merging and dialoguing instead of fighting for primacy. And I think that for Asia in general, we have, as you just said, a very diverse group of nations and ethnicities, despite what the stereotypes might be. And some of these nations are doing much better than others. Some have benefited from the New World Order. Some are still way behind and need to be caught up. And the only way to do that is if all of them be treated equally on an equal playing field. And right now, Asia needs to not just get in sync with the global world order, things like the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the WTO, but also to create their own institutions, such as the Asian Infrastructure and Investment Bank, create Asian institutions that have that Asians can take part in and create new geopolitical alliances built upon this idea of difference but commonality in terms of goals.
I mean, essentially working together to solve some of Asia's most pressing challenges, such as infrastructure being one of them. Professor Rong, I want to ask you, President Xi also spoke about civilizations keeping up with the pace of the times. How do you interpret that statement? What do you think he means?
Well, I think he means that while all the civilization, I mean, every civilization has its proud history and proud past, that also has to be adapted to the reality by keeping pace with the time. And so this is a kind of a balance. On the one hand, I think every and each civilization should manage to maintain its sort of best part of that, and in the meantime, I also have to be innovative, so that and also by learning from others. I mean, so this is a kind of the right way to do that. And the Chinese civilization, being the one of the oldest civilizations, had always been doing that. And the past decades of China, New China, the achievement, the progress that's made, it's because of that.
Yeah.
So this is, I think, very much, again, a strong and a clear message. And President Xi wanted.
I mean, if you look at China's history, it is about working together and living side by side with various faiths coming into China throughout the centuries, different ideas and different peoples coming in to form one Chinese nation as well. Professor Moser, I want to get your take in terms of the timing of this event. Why is it important right now to have a dialogue of Asian civilizations?
Well, I think everyone sort of senses a shift, a sort of a seismic shift going on right now. Some of it is in a bad way, like an earthquake, the sort of rebellion against the neoliberal order that we've seen with the election of Trump and other sort of similar figures in other countries, in Brazil and other countries, and a general malaise among the working class, the lower classes, that they're not benefiting from all of this. And I think that there's also a sense that we've sort of, some of the old ideas that were built among Western values that sort of arose after the Second World War have successfully created pockets of wealth and have sort of revolutionized the world order, but they sort of seem they've reached a dead end now, that we see some of the negative aspects that are coming out now. And there's a feeling, not only a hope, but maybe a feeling that what's happening inevitably is a kind of a new way of thinking. New ways of thinking are now coming into vogue. Yeah. Everyone feels like we need to find some new frameworks and sort of start again, especially with Asia and particularly China having risen now to such prominence. The time is right.
Yeah, and this platform is just getting the conversation started in terms of building a closer bonds between civilizations in Asia and across the world. We are going to leave it there. Many thanks for insights. Rong Ying, Vice President of the China Institute of International Studies, as well as David Moser, Associate Dean at the Yenching Academy at Peking University. Thank you to you both.
Thank you.